And for more on this, let's bring in Behnam Taleblu. He is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's in Washington. Behnam, thanks so much for joining us. This attack happened during Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's trip to Tehran. He's hoping to ease tensions between the U.S. and Iran. What do you make of the timing of this attack on these tankers?
Great to be with you, and I think the timing is one of the key components of this attack here. Not only did it go after a major commercial vessel, not only did it go after some of Japan's prized Persian Gulf oil imports, but also it came at a time when the Prime Minister of Japan has come to Tehran, which is a 41-year gap since the last time that happened. Moreover, of course, Shinzo Abe was believed to be trying to play the role of a mediator between the U.S. and Iran. I think the Iranian strategy here of going after an Iranian tanker is to embrace the dynamics of risk, to spook fear into the Japanese, and to use Abe's good relationship with Trump to send Abe back to Washington and to try to get Abe to become someone who would be essentially lobbying for sanctions to be removed due to the crisis in the Gulf.
Well, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that these attacks were meant to disrupt global oil markets. And in fact, the price of crude oil shot up 2% after these attacks. Is this an example of Iran using violence to help its bottom line?
Absolutely, but beyond that, it wants to raise insurance premiums as well. Iran made a threat several years ago that if it couldn't export oil, be it through the Strait of Hormuz or because of oil sanctions, that no country in the region would be able to export its oil. So consider this Iran trying to make good on its threat. But rather than have mainstream Washington look at Iran conventionally or formally closing the Straits of Hormuz, this is Iran's attempt to engage in graduated escalation, select several highly symbolic targets in the area, and say that Iran is able to carry out such more operations in the future if the West doesn't swerve and deliver sanctions relief and allow Iranian oil to come back onto the market.
Well, let's talk about this specific area. How important is the Strait of Hormuz to global oil production and supply?
It's imperative. The countries in the Persian Gulf contain large sums of both known, proven, and assumed or expected volumes of crude oil as well as condensates. These are things that are extracted, of course, from the earth. About 20 to 30% of the seaborne oil trade traverses the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. And what's more, Iran knows this, and these actions are designed to signal that they are willing to put a knife to the jugular vein of the international economy.
So what options does the U.S. have to formulate a response here?
Well, I think the first thing is to continue to put the evidence out there, make it highly public, discuss, put it out there for the open source community, the analytical community, Iran's capabilities and intentions in the region, show that this is not a one-off, but that Iran has been long using terrorist tactics on land as well as on sea. The next, of course, is to multilateralize the case for pressure against Iran, go to friends, allies, as well as the United Nations. Next, of course, Washington has to make sure it has authorities in place to engage in operations that I believe David mentioned, such as reflagging or escorts of commercial vessels if the Strait of Hormuz, Persian Gulf, or Gulf of Oman become jurisdictions that are too dangerous for commercial vessels to traverse.
Well, Japan was a buyer of Iranian oil until last month when sanctions kicked in, and it is now inserting itself, as you noted, into the negotiations between Iran and the U.S. What does Japan ultimately hope to gain here?
Even if Prime Minister Shinzo Abe isn't able to deliver Khamenei to the negotiating table, which was highly unlikely to begin with, this does boost Japan's profile. Traditionally, Japan engages in much more quiet diplomacy, but because Japan had good relationships both with the U.S. and with Iran, and Prime Minister Abe both with President Trump, and the last time he was in Iran accompanying his father, who was foreign minister in 1983, Abe met with a younger president as opposed to Supreme Leader Khamenei. So I think this was designed to boost Japan's profile, but also attempt to moderate between two countries that are actually getting in the way of Japan's bottom line. Japan is reliant on Persian Gulf energy, be it Iranian, Saudi, or other.
Well, Iran's Ayatollah told Japanese Prime Minister Abe that, quote, "I do not see Trump as worthy of any message exchange, and I do not have any reply for him now or in the future." That's according to Iranian state media. Do you see Iran coming to the negotiating table anytime soon, even if their country's economy is in decline?
Worth, trust, respect, while those are all important, when you look at the few times Iran has actually changed its national security policy or stepped back from some of its key ideological and strategic goals, those were not the factors that animated it. It was really about regime survival. And that's what the Max Pressure campaign is appearing to do. It's looking to replicate the conditions that actually put Tehran into a corner and then say there is no way out but through. To me, it's not a matter of if Iran will engage. It's a matter of when, how, and under what conditions. And that's very important for the administration to know, to not be too eager for diplomacy and to not undermine the efficacy of its sanctions regime, because that's exactly what attacks like those today are designed to do.
All right, Behnam Taleblu. Behnam, thanks very much.
My pleasure.